Good day, my scholars. Welcome to my school channel. My name is Alexandra. So in today's video, we'll be looking at the clause under the grammatical hierarchy, occupying the fourth position on the ranking scale of the grammatical hierarchy. Please stay with us, don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to my school channel. So right now we'll begin the lesson, and the topic for today's lesson is the clause or clauses as you have on the board. Now I've outlined 4 objectives for today's lesson, and they are: number 1, the definition of a clause; number 2, the types of clause; number 3, the classification of subordinate clause; and number 4, the types and function of subordinate clauses. So let's begin with the first objective, which is the definition of a clause. Now, first and foremost, I want to remind you of the position of a clause on the grammatical hierarchy. Do not forget, it occupies the 4th position. So the 4th position on the ranking scale. Do not forget, in ascending order, it occupies the 4th position in ascending order on the grammatical hierarchy. So please take note of this. Now, having reminded ourselves of the position it occupies on the ranking scale of the grammatical hierarchy, we'll move to the definition of a clause. Now, many scholars have tried to define a clause, and out of all of this definition, I've been able to deduce 3 elements that are very useful in defining a clause. So, when you want to define a clause, this element should be embedded in your definition. Now, the first element is, it is a group of related words. Okay, it's a group of words. Number 2 is that it has subject, verb, relationship, or you can call it combination. It has subject-verb combination. And number 3, it may or may not express complete meaning. Now, this definition, these elements are all encompassing when you want to define a clause, and would understand this subsequently as we progress in this video. Now, let's take, for instance, a clause. I'm going to give an example of a clause. Okay, a simple sentence is usually considered as a clause. So let's take this simple sentence: she opened the door. Now, this is a group of words, so it conforms to this subject-verb relationship. You can see the subject, and you can see open, which is the verb. So this is the object, this is the verb, and this is the subject. So you can see the combination of a subject and a verb. And the last one, it may or may not express complete meaning. So you can see that it expresses. It may express. So you can see this element. We'll get to find out this element soon. So this definition is very good to defining a clause. Okay, do not forget I said a simple sentence is considered as a clause. Now let's move to the next objective, which is the types of clause. Now there are 2 types of clause. They are independent clause, independent and dependent. The independent clause is also called the main clause, and the dependent is called the subordinate. So let's have this here. Okay. Okay, so we have 1 and 2. So we have 2 types of clause: the independent clause and the dependent clause. The dependent clause is also called subordinate, and independent clause is also called the main clause. Now think of the word independent. What does it mean? To be able to stand alone, to be able to do something by yourself. Now apply this in clause definition. So independent clause can stand on its own and can make a complete sense. So we can give this example, this simple sentence, a main clause, because it can stand on its own and it makes a complete sense. It expresses a complete meaning. The next one is dependent subordinate clause. This one cannot stand alone. So you think of the word dependent. When you are dependent, that means you need assistance. Okay, so dependent clauses also need assistance. They cannot stand alone, and so therefore they do not express complete thought. So that will give it to this. Okay, so they may not, in this case, dependent clauses do not express complete thought. Let's take, for example, when I knocked. So we can see a subject here, we can see a verb here. Okay, so this would also have a subject-verb relationship. It may or may not have a subject-verb relationship, but then it is depending on this. We can't have this sentence, when I knocked, it does not express a complete meaning. But here you have, she opened the door. It expresses a complete meaning. But this one depends on this one to make sense. But this one does not need or require this to make complete sense. And that is why I said it may or may not express complete thought. So it has a complete thought and it also does not have a complete thought. Why? Because of the different types of clauses. So this is a good example of dependent and independent clauses. Now, I want you to know something about dependent clauses. They are usually or often introduced by a subordinate conjunction, which is when. In this sentence, this is the subordinate conjunction. So it is usually introduced by a subordinate conjunction. Let's take more examples of subordinate conjunction by moving to the visual. So we have more examples here. We have if, we have though, or though, as, since, so that, because, until, till, unless, when, where, why, who, which, before, while, after, then, lest, what, whom, whose, as far as, despite, and etc. Okay, you can see that this is a combination of relative pronouns such as whom, we have who, okay, whose, we have a combination of relative pronoun and conjunctions. So these are called subordinate conjunctions under the clauses. Okay, now let's take a look at more examples of the main clause and the subordinate clause, or the independent clause and the dependent clause. Okay, so we have sentences here. So number one, he couldn't go to the university last week because he was ill. Now you can see that the subordinate clauses are underlined in these examples. Okay, so we have the subordinate clause here introduced by a subordinate conjunction because. Okay, so it doesn't express complete meaning because it was ill. It's not complete, but it couldn't go to the university last week. That alone can stand on its own, and so it is an independent clause. So when I heard of his death, okay, imagine someone talking to you and says, when I heard of his death, it is not complete. So this is the subordinate clause. I was terrified. It's a main clause, it can stand on its own. Now, despite playing very well is the subordinate clause or the dependent clause, which is depending on this main clause. So may have a complete meaning. The team lost the game. Okay, the lady whom you asked about is my sister. So the lady is my sister is the main clause. Whom you asked about is the subordinate clause. So this cannot stand alone or cannot make complete sense. It needs the independent clause. The lady is my sister to express a complete thought. Now let's move to the next objective, which is the classification of subordinate clauses. Okay, subordinate clauses are the main focus when we want to talk about the types and all. So let's look at the classification, which is structural. Okay, the physical structure of subordinate clauses. But before we do that, please subscribe to the special video package or the full video of this content. Okay, all you need to do is you click on the link in the description below. It takes you to the My School website. There you'll be asked to subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe so you can have access to the full or the complete video. Thank you for joining my school. Do not forget to hit the like button, click on the subscribe button, and lastly, tap on the bell notification to get informed as soon as we release the next videos.